Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Get Together session brought to you by getAbstract. My name is Kirsten Miller-Doberman, and I am your host for today. We are so glad that you're joining us from wherever in the world you may be here today for our virtual book club, which we started a couple weeks ago at the beginning of the lockdowns to help put really valuable information from our collection of books in our abstract library, of which there are over 22,000 in case you want to go check them out, but also the authors and experts in our orbit to bring compelling information about leadership and management and work life and the new normal and put it into context and present it to you. That's what we are all about. And today we have a fabulous conversation about what leadership is going to look like in that new normal. But starting from the individual's perspective, how can you reset your belief system so that you can help to lead or improve your organization? And with us today is Michael Vaz. He is the Vice President of Learning and Development for Accor and just did an incredible TED Talk about this very subject. And we're very, very glad to welcome him today. Michael, welcome to our Get Together.
Hi, Kirsten. Thank you very much. And thanks, getAbstract, for having me. I appreciate this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I watched your TED Talk and it really, really impressed me. And you hear a lot about change and what practical behaviors need to be implemented in order to do that. But it really starts so much deeper than that. Can you just start by describing what a belief system is?
Sure, yeah. So in the TED Talk, one of the most important things is to codify that information, right? A lot of people can have ideas, but it's about codifying it. So the way I describe a belief system is anything that you've allowed yourself to believe about yourself. It's as simple as that. So, and of course, I linked it to neuroscience, saying that every time we have a thought about something, anything, and this could be just something that you experience in life, something that you experience in a relationship, in a job, with a team member, you tend to have a thought, and these thoughts have stayed with us through our entire lives. So think about from when you were, a little kid growing up. Some of the strongest neural pathways were created, and those things have become behaviors. They've become the way we operate. So I always say that it's what you've allowed yourself to believe about yourself. That's how I define a belief system. So these little thoughts that have translated into things we keep thinking about day in and day out have become just part of who we are and part of how we live. And they translate in a way that's unbelievable. They become some of the excuses we give ourselves today. And that's why I started calling it your very own personal BS, or your belief system.
Right. Yeah. So we'll have to recodify the way our brain has been coded to interpret BS to something else, something more positive.
Sure.
So everyone is talking about what the new normal is going to look like. I'm sure it's a part of our corporate jargon that's going to get very old very fast. But transitioning into the new workplace, the new business environment, the new economy, what kind of preparations do people need to start making right now, especially when it comes to examining that belief system in order to be ready for what's to come?
See, the one thing that we have today, and something that I think you and I have maybe talked about a little bit, and thank you for reaching out, was just the fact that our belief systems can either get us ready for the future or they can hold us back, right? And the best way to check and see if we're truly ready for the new normal. And I want to say one thing here to maybe hopefully give a little bit of hope to people that are watching or listening. A lot of people keep saying, let's talk about going back to normal. I want to almost ask you to look at the flip side. Let's look forward to a new normal, right? Never talk about let's go back to normal. Let's look forward to a new normal. So as long as we're looking forward, the new normal is going to look different. And the better prepared we are psychologically, emotionally, with our foundational beliefs in place, the better we're going to do in that new normal. So I think the time we've been given, I keep telling people, is time we'll never get back. Whether you're holed up, with your kids, whether you're holed up with your families, whether you're holed up with a spouse, with your loved ones, this is time you'll never get back. So take the time to build some incredible new belief systems for yourself on what's truly important, on the fact that maybe you don't have to spend, 20 hours at your office, on whether you don't have to do things the way it was done before, on whether a normal day isn't a normal day anymore. And I think people are experiencing that right now, wherever you're at. A day just doesn't feel normal. But there are good sides to it. There's some incredible upsides. I've heard from leaders across this lockdown in many different organizations. And a lot of them allude to the fact that, I'll give you one example, hopefully, and if I'm talking too much, just stop me anytime. But one of the
No,
leaders
go
said
for
to
it.
me, there has never been a time for more collaboration. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, you remember the days when we were traveling and taking those flights and just on the go all the time? And we would say, hey, do you have time for a 5-minute call today? And they would say, no, no way, let's do next week. That doesn't happen anymore. People are willing to make the time.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
And I love that. So people have changed their beliefs about what a busy day should look like, to involve having lunch with the kids, to involve making lunch for the kids, and then jumping on a meeting. You know what I mean? And I think that's unlocked so much potential for us if we only just looked at the positives.
Yeah, I so agree with you there. And it also seems like trying to identify what belief systems are going to work in the new normal, it really is shedding of old identities and creating new ones, I think. Because maybe for someone who, a
Absolutely.
leader who built an identity on being a micromanager and being able to see everyone at their desks and cultivating a really productive workforce, now doesn't have that opportunity to micromanage in the same way, and might have to say, I'm going to define my
Absolutely.
success by other metrics. What are some other
I
new
agree.
identities that people can be focusing on creating as they transition forward into a new reality?
Well, a lot of the times, and we had a great discussion recently. Somebody talked about agility, right? And that's everybody's been throwing these words around for the longest time. Being
Yeah.
more agile. I don't think there's ever been a time where the whole world has had to be agile, and that's come by default. But there are people. Don't get me wrong. There are people that have embraced this lockdown and embraced this time. But there are also people that struggled with it, right? So I guess the whole idea here is try to be open to what's coming in the future. Just try to be open. Try not to be restrictive. We've seen lots of people talk about how to dress in meetings, and of course, we want to maintain some of that, and we want to keep that professionalism, but also try to be open to what people are going through. And I don't think there's a better time than this to start practicing for what is to come. See, the
Yeah.
future is not going to just go back to being the way it was. And in fact, all the media is telling us that, social media is telling us that, every news channel is telling us that. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. See, in this time, we start making time for what's really important. We start dwelling on what's really important. I also encourage people at this time, and I know that it's been thrown around a lot, but I want to say it just for the sake of saying it. Dwell on some good content. Feed yourself with good content at this time. When I say build your belief systems to get ready for the new normal, it's saying I talk about three things, and perhaps we'll talk a little bit more about that. One of
Yeah.
the main things, I talk about three little topics. I talk about starting with your heart, focusing on your feed, and then watching your words because they shape the world you live in. I want to talk just about the feed for 1 second, if you let me. And it's saying
Yeah.
what an incredible opportunity right now to use this time to focus on your feed. What are some things you're watching? What are some things you're reading? I know a lot of people talked about, hey, learn a new language, and a lot of people roll their eyes. And the moment you roll your eyes, I say that's a great one to catch yourself and go, why did I roll my eyes just now? What's my belief system? Have I stopped myself from thinking I could learn a new language? I could be better than getting out of this. I guess that's a very important thing, and I'll talk more about that as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. I do love those three topic areas that you break down in your TED Talk. And I want to go back to start with your heart. What does that mean,
Sure.
first of all? Um, and when you are starting with yourself, you talk about identifying strengths and advantages. How
Yeah.
exactly does one go about doing that?
So the start with the heart was fundamental because when people have often asked, when do I need to know, or when's a great time to do a BS check? Well, now. And how you do that is just take any area of your life. And I tell people this, if you ever want to do a BS check, the belief system check, just think about any area of your life where you're not seeing the results that you want to see. You're not getting the results you wanted. Perhaps it's an addiction you've tried to kick for a long time. And we know how people struggle with that. All of us do, right? We're human. Maybe it's a relationship that could be better. Maybe it's how you lead that's not producing the same results as you would have liked. So start with the heart kind of says, okay, if I'm not seeing the results I want, it's a great example for me to go back and check what's in my heart about this area of my life. So if I'm struggling with communicating with my son. Why am I struggling? What have I allowed myself to believe about myself in this area of my life? And that's why self is so important. I use that example at the end of the talk where I said, every airline, right? Every airline every time you're on a plane, and that's been a while now, but every time you're on a plane, it's the safety briefing that says, in the event of emergency, masks will drop down from the ceiling. Put yours on first. And every parent on that plane is squirming in their seats because they know that's not going to happen. If there's an emergency, I want to put the mask, but there's a reason things are designed that way. It's because if you don't feed yourself, if you don't start with your heart, how are you going to have enough in the bank, in your emotional bank, to feed other people? How are you going to have enough to feed your kids? How are you going to have enough to feed your teams and lead your teams? So that's what start with the heart means. It says start with yourself. You asked me about strengths, and maybe I'll speak to that for a second. What I wanted to remind people through this, and this was such a powerful thing for me. I debated so much with my own topic of choice, but I was very blessed because it came at this time. I've always wanted to do a TEDx at some point. It was always on the bucket list, but I remember saying, and a foundational belief for me is just my faith. It's always carried me through life, right? And I said I don't want to chase after it. I'll receive a TED talk. I'll accept a TED talk when they come to me and when they ask. And I had this incredible opportunity. I was blessed with this opportunity to get up there and speak. So I really kind of prayed hard about the topic and say, what's a topic that people need to listen to at this point in time? And so this thing came out of that. And so it wasn't designed to be something just for a specific group of people. The belief systems apply to anybody. It applies to a child. In fact, I had a mom, right, who's also a consultant, but more importantly, she related to me from a mom perspective. She said, I just watched your talk, and I'm going to play it for my kid tonight. Another mom, a couple of days later, who I work with, said to me, I showed it to my child, and the child's 9. I said, what did he get from it? And she said he really related to the fact that he was born a winner. And I remember being so kind of cautious when I said that. I said, is this going to be met with an eye roll? Because every time, and Kirsten, I train people for a living, and I do leadership sessions for a living. I'm very blessed to be doing that for a living. But every time I say this to people, it's undoubtedly a bit of an eye roll. A few eye rolls in the class is what I expect from leaders at the most senior level. So I wanted this talk to be a reminder to everybody, no matter what stage you are. You could be a CEO of a company. You could be a mom making dinner for her family and struggling with it maybe. You could be a dad that's just not had enough time. You could be somebody who's not making your goals. I wanted it to be applicable for everyone at any stage of life. Even if you're a kid, it's reminding yourself, even if you're a CEO, that you were born a winner. And people tend to forget these things. They're basic things, but people have tended to forget just the power that they have inside of them.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think, and this could be a whole additional video on the fact that we sometimes feel safe in focusing on our weaknesses or our anxiety, that fear becomes a safe place, oddly enough, and to believe that you can have victory in something, that you can do something, that you can be more, is actually scarier than staying in your comfort zone. But let's move on to the second point, the focus and the feed, focusing on what you're taking in. Obviously, GetAbstract is our mission is to equip people with the knowledge to make better decisions in their personal and professional lives. So we're trying to be a part of making sure that the content people do get and do keep their eyeballs on is good and encouraging and helpful. But what steps would you suggest to people to start monitoring what kind of content they're taking in and whether or not it's having a positive or a negative effect?
I always say we're blessed with this set of emotions. Now, a lot of people have tended to delve too much into that over the last few years, and they talk about emotional intelligence. And I agree that emotional intelligence is incredibly important. But a lot of people lose the train of thought on what and how to use emotional intelligence. See, emotions were given to us to kind of give us a little indication of where we're going right and where we're going wrong. So when I talk about the feed, I talk about the fact that if you're watching something, if you're binge watching a show, and you're starting to feel anxious, and I quote a very powerful example. I said that people started to experience PTSD from watching the Chicago shootings a few years ago. They started to experience PTSD from watching the news, just talking about the coronavirus today, right? So if you're starting to binge watch something and you know your emotions are off the charts and you know you're starting to feel anxious, why do another 4 hours of it? It's not meant for you. Get up, take a break, switch your feed, and switch your focus, right? Um, and getAbstract is a powerful part of that. I mean, people, they have so much good content, right? But in a world with so much content, not everything is meant for you. And that's why I talk about the fact that life's too short to read the wrong content and to feed on the wrong content. So I came up with this concept of FOLO, right? The fear of living once. You only have 24 hours a day. In fact, everybody has that 24 hours a day. But how did you spend yours? And look, there's no condemnation here. People can binge watch whatever they want to binge watch. And of course, we all do it. I do it. I'll binge watch a show on Netflix and I'll go, oh my gosh, I've wasted 2 hours. How do I get this back? But it's that realization. And people should maybe just go, wow, I spent 2 hours on this. But what's it given me? How has it made me feel? How has it left me feeling? A lot of kids will binge watch maybe a horror movie, right? And then it plays on their emotions, and then they wake up with bad dreams. And then you think, where'd that come from? Well, you just planted 2 hours of those pictures in your heart. And because the brain just takes in, the brain is phenomenal. We've been blessed with an incredible machine. And that's why I call it the operating system, right? But it just believes everything you tell it. It just accepts it for what it is. It doesn't question right or wrong. So that's very powerful. So when someone's just watching, let's say, a horror movie and then wakes up screaming at night, wondering what happened, it's because you just planted 2 hours worth of content, and now you got to replace it with better content. So that's what I mean by
Yep.
the focus on the feed. There's so much
Yeah.
negative news today. We got to watch how much of it we're taking in.
Yeah, it's so true. I actually, at the start of the pandemic, I decided I'm not listening to a news podcast or watching any news after 1 p.m. because I was realizing that it was
That's
creating a
good.
lot of anxiety, latent anxiety that, that would affect me in other
Yeah,
ways. It wasn't that I would be worrying about the pandemic or its effects, but it was keeping this like constant little hamster on a wheel of anxiety about, that affected my views and outlook on other things. And so I decided to do that and was exceptionally
absolutely.
helpful. So let's
Yeah,
move
I
on
love how
to
you put
this
that.
last. Yeah. So everyone who's watching this, take these words and take some concrete steps and just try it. See how it feels for you. Right? Can't hurt.
Absolutely.
But lastly, Michael, you talk about watching your words, how words and language create the environment around you. Obviously, going into the new normal, words are going to be very important. So how do we use our words to create a good reality in the new situation in concrete terms?
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's a great question. For me, it's start by just watching what's coming out of your mouth. I think that's a starting point. Because there's a great saying, and I'm full of these a lot of the times, but there's a great saying that says, "Your mouth speaks of what your heart is full of." Right? It's a great proverb. And it says you speak about what you know. You speak about what you've stored in your heart. That's why I talk about the power of belief systems being so important. If you're not putting good things into your heart, and when I say heart, it's your mind and your heart, your emotions, basically. How are you feeding your emotions every day? Um, Also determine the words that are going to come out of your mouth. So I'd say to people, check your language today. Check what you're saying yes to. Check what you're saying no to. Check what you're saying, I don't have the time for doing this. And we've taught people all sorts of things in leadership, right? We tell them to be assertive, and we tell them to say, okay, I don't have time for this. I need to juggle my time. And that's all good. But just check what you're allowing yourself to believe about yourself. Because a lot of the times you could be limiting yourself. You could be limiting yourself from taking on new projects. You asked me about the strengths. Can I speak a little bit about that? I'll tell you how powerful
Absolutely.
language is just by using the strengths test, right? We talk about the strengths test, and I use Gallup because Gallup has got incredible empirical data, a lot of incredible research backing it up. It's the most positive psychometrics in the world. But here is how you know how people are naturally drawn to the negative. When people do, I often tell people, do a top 5 strength assessment. But there are 2 sets of tests available. One's a top 5, where I get to know my top 5 strengths, but the other one is I get to know my top 34 strengths. What's insane and gets me every time is that people will say, I looked at my top 5. Now, what am I weak at? It's unbelievable.
Mm.
The strength. It's called a strengths test, for goodness sake. I want to wake them up there and go. It's called a strengths test. It's not about what you're weak in, but we as human beings. This is why I tell people start with the positive, and it's not false optimism. I want to say that very clearly. It is not about being, about false optimism. It's getting your belief systems right. If you say to yourself constantly, I'm not good at numbers, check this out, right? I'm not good at numbers. Then your brain will believe it and accept it as truth. And every time you approach a project that involves numbers, you're going to switch off and you're going to say, I'm not good at numbers. Now, that may not be true on any way, shape, or form, right? Am I noticing a BS check at this point? Okay.
Yes, I'm checking on my belief system right now about the numbers. Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, me too. I've had that moment too, by the way. So again, this thing comes out of real life experience, right, and real people. But check your, and then that's why I say your words shape your world. Because when you're saying things out loud, your brain is creating those neural pathways. And every time something comes up then about numbers and budget, you freak out, and then you start producing stress levels that just aren't necessary. Because you were born a winner, because
Yeah.
you've been given gifts and abilities, because you're not necessarily bad at that. See the voices that we carry, and I talk about having the right people surround you. The belief systems we've built are from the time we've been on the playground. So if something worked for us back then, we expect it to work for us today, and that's just not how life works. If I pushed somebody off the swing when I was 4 and I got the swing, then I tried that same thing when I become a first team leader, and maybe it gets me a little bit of a result. So I keep using that mechanism, and today it just doesn't work. It's the same thing. A teacher told me I was bad at numbers. Today, every time numbers come up, I go, well, I'm not good at numbers. Well, that's just a lie that somebody told you, or told, and maybe it was just a project. Who knows? Maybe the teacher was in a bad mood. You're gonna hold that on to that for the rest of your life. And that's why I say that we can limit ourselves with our language. So just watch your language and then go back to those belief systems and go, wow, what have I allowed to stick with me? What have I allowed to remain at the heart level that's now maybe even stopping a promotion? It's unreal what can
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, our language is so important to monitor and at whatever level in an organization you're in. And I'd actually like to ask you specifically for leaders that are at this crucial moment trying to build trust like they never have had to before. What words can they say? Because there's lots of actions that you can do to build trust within a team, but what kinds of things can leaders say to try to build trust or to try to communicate that they trust their employees? Like give us some phrases, give us some examples. What actually works?
Well, I love that. But we speak about trust and building trust, and a couple of things. One is trust doesn't come overnight, right? It comes from small deposits. So it comes from 5 minutes you spend on the phone with someone. It's as simple as that. But in that time, you speak. I read something that said, make sure your words are building people up. Make sure they're words of grace, where you're blessed with so much. Start to speak to others like champions as well. If you want to remember you're a champion, right, and you were born a winner, and you won a race before you were even born, then you were blessed with a lot of gifts and abilities to even be in this role. How do you view yourself being in this role? So that's my question to a lot of leaders. In fact, we did a session with about 150 leaders in a very short period of time, and they resonated with things like this, with us asking them, are you grateful for your role today? Because there are about 10 leaders out there that want to take your job. So first of all, start being grateful
Mm.
for what you've been given. That's number one. And then when you're speaking to people, you can either speak to them like they're failures, and guess what? You would be right, because they'll start behaving like the failure that you're calling them out to be, or start to speak to them like champions. If you're able to speak to people like they're champions, guess what? They rise to it. There's an incredibly powerful story, and I'll just share that with you, or you probably heard of it. But it's about this school teacher that actually comes in and does a little stint, like a substitute teacher in the States, actually, that comes in and does this stint for somebody going on maternity leave. And in that time, he took people up to incredible levels, to A pluses, and he was getting results from A pluses. And what's interesting was this was a very average class. They were not above the norm in any way. So people thought there was foul play. In fact, they actually, but nothing was wrong. They interviewed this, nothing was wrong. So they called him aside. They said, "We love what you're doing. You've produced extraordinary results in a very short time. How have you done that?" And he looked at the principal and said, "Well, you gave me, students with an incredibly high IQ." And the principal said, "No, we didn't. I hate to break this to you, but that's not true." He says, "No, no, no, you're right. On the first day, you gave me the IQ scores, and they have incredible IQs. I was just obviously teaching them at that level." And he said, "We never show the IQ of our students. We never reveal this. This is confidential information." He said, "No, remember the green slip of paper?" They went back, they tracked back, they pulled out the green slip of paper. He said, "Yeah, that's it." And he went, "These are the locker numbers."
Oh my gosh.
These are the kids' locker
I have
numbers.
not heard that. That's
And
great.
I love
That
that.
is great.
I love that story. I love that story because it reminds people that if you relate to people, and this is what that teacher did, he elevated his game because he thought, "Hey, I'm teaching genius students. I can't mess this up." But if you talk to people, that is how trust will be built. People will tend to trust you because you're relating to them like the winners they are.
That's
So
so
hopefully
good.
that produces
Thank
some
you.
incredible results.
Absolutely. You've shared so much wisdom on here, and we are wrapping up. But thank you. And I want to encourage everyone to go ahead and we will post the link to Michael's TED Talk so that you can go check out more about delving into your belief system, how that shapes your reality, and how that can help you transition to this new normal. Last question, Michael. What
Sure.
do people need to leave behind pre-corona? And what do leaders need to cultivate? What's the most important thing for you? The shedding, the leaving behind, and the transitioning to the new normal for a leader. What's most important?
I'm going to keep it in theme with exactly what I've talked about, which I think is the need of the hour. Leave the BS behind. Leave the stuff that didn't give you results. Leave it. Why are you holding on to it? Right? It's amazing. I'll tell you one more story before we leave. It was a role that I took, a regional role, out in China. And you would not believe this, but there's a general manager sitting across from me, and he says, "Michael, can I tell you, you're too nice." And I was meeting this guy for the first time in my whole life. It was actually the first 10 minutes I spent with the guy, and he said, "You're too nice." And I said, "Wow, compliment or not?" He says, "No, not compliment, because we shout here to get results. We shout at our people to get every day to get the results we want." And I said, "Wow." I said, how what kind of life are you living, and how do I imagine the people that are reporting to you today? You're waking up every morning telling me that you want to go out and deliberately yell at people to get results. You know what was funny? He had the worst results in the entire region. Are you with me? This is incredible to know that he wasn't even paying attention to his results. He said, "We're yelling at people to get results." And he had the worst results. So a lot of the times we're feeding ourselves with the fact that we're still right after 10 years sometimes of not getting the right results in our life. I always say it's the root and the fruit, right? Check what results you're getting. What fruits are being produced in your life? What's the results? Do your people love you? Are you getting great guest scores? Are you getting great employee scores? Because if not, then you're holding on to some BS, excuse me, but some BS and belief systems that are holding you back. And you're still holding on to them thinking they're producing the right results for you. So leave that behind with the virus. Leave that behind in this time. Don't go forward carrying the same old BS that you've been playing with all these years. Start to build new things. Start at the heart. Check your focus, check your feet, check your words that you're using. Start to reshape and rebuild in this time, because you're never going to get it back. And you're going to be a whole new successful person with a whole new set of successful beliefs. That's what I pray for.
So cool. Michael, thank you so much. We could talk to you for so much longer. There's so much great content here, but I know that this will be
Me too.
extremely encouraging for the people that watch. And I just want to encourage you all to really think, be aware, do a check. What is driving you, and how can you change that for the better? Because we all can. That's the thing. We can
Absolutely
change our brains. Thank goodness.
Absolutely.
I can become
Thank goodness for
a
that. Thank
numbers
God for that.
person, right?
Absolutely. I'm with you on that.
All right, I'm
I'm
holding
behind you
out hope.
100%.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Michael, so much for joining us again. Such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for having me.
And
Have a great
thank
day,
all of you
everyone.
so
And
much.
thank you so much for watching.
Yeah, thank you all of you for joining as well. And if you like this video, of course, please share it. You can find it on our Vimeo channel as well as on Facebook and our YouTube channel. It will be posted there. We would love for these resources to get out to as many people as possible because we want to be a part of creating a really wonderful, productive, and fruitful new normal with all of you. So wherever you are in the world, wishing you a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Bye.